Welcome to part 2 of our relationship series, Thriving in Relationships. Today, we're now at the end of a very special day. It was Hey Menachem Av today. It's the yahrzeit of the Arizal HaKadosh. And as we remember his yahrzeit, may he be a schus for, may our remembering his yahrzeit be a schus for all of us, as he is a schus for all of us. In the Siddur that the Arizal wrote, he added a line that was not there before. He added a line that we should say before we start davening. We should consciously unite and commit ourselves to the unity of the entire Jewish people. Because during davening, we ask, as we sit with our open siddur or stand with our open siddur, we're asking Hashem to fulfill our needs. And before we do that, we want to be able to receive the brachas. We want to be able to receive the blessings. And the way to do that is to be a whole vessel, not a cracked vessel, a whole vessel, a whole self. And the Ari HaKadosh held that he recognized that the importance of, when we are carrying resentments, when we feel distant and separate, angry and grudging of another person, that creates a crack in the flow of Hashem's energy and brachas to us. So the line that the Ari wrote before davening, wrote in the Siddur is, Hareini mekabel alai mitzvahs aseh shel v'ahavta l'reacha kamecha. I hereby accept upon myself to fulfill the mitzvah of loving my fellow as myself. And we are in the 9 days. And I want to just take this moment to remind myself and all of us to use this time to really increase in acts of achdus, and acts of togetherness, and acts of unity, and acts that demonstrate that we care about others in a very real way. So give a little tzedakah, an extra act of random, unconditional acts of goodness and kindness. Be the first one to break the ice in a relationship. Be the first one to initiate change. There's no better time. And in this chus, may the Beis Hamikdash really be rebuilt, and we should just get out of galus. There's an outline to this workshop. If you must have gotten it by email or by WhatsApp if you get things that way. So maybe you have a little bit of an idea of what we'll be discussing, but let's jump right in. All right, if you're listening to this recording and you would like an email of it, email to info@energizedliving.org, and Chayla will, Be'ezus Hashem, send you the notes, the outline of what we're going to learn today. Okay, we're going to start with an experience that someone shared. I realize now from Aliza, from your story, that there's such a benefit when we hear somebody else's experience. In teaching, we say show, don't tell, right? So when you can hear somebody else's experience, that's where you can see it and not visually, and really get to know things so much more clearly. So here is a story that somebody shared with me when her name is, I'm going to call her Bela. Of course, I'm changing her name, changing the details, but the main idea and the process that she did is the same. I want to first say that Bela has been doing this work for at least a full year. And before this, she did other work. So she's definitely ahead of the game. And I don't want you to judge yourself if you feel that you can't do what she did, if you can't do this as smoothly as she describes it. The point of sharing this is to show what it looks like and how you can, then we'll talk about how you can make this happen. Okay, so here's what happened. Bela appreciates a healthier lifestyle. She likes to serve her family healthy food. As part of that, she doesn't buy bakery food. She doesn't buy any takeout. Everything she serves at her table, everything that's in her fridge and in her freezer is homemade, prepared with the healthiest possible ingredients, mostly made from scratch. And her cakes and cookies use only the better quality ingredients. She invests a lot of effort also that her family could have healthier food. And over the years, she perfected her collection of recipes. So she really actually makes good food. It's not just healthy, it's actually tasty. And it means a lot to her to feed her family that way. So she has two full-size freezers in her house. And she really tries to keep them nicely stocked with variety, with choices, with options. This past Thursday, Bela realized that her freezer is kind of empty, and she decided to replenish her stash of goodies. And so because she wanted to be sure, it's Tisha B'Av, we like to break the fast and have something before the fast. So she wanted to make sure there would be a variety of choices, especially since her husband likes to nosh on cake. So she spent most of that day mixing, rolling, preparing, and really schwitzing. It was a hot day, and this was a lot of baking. And as she filled up a full-sized freezer, the second freezer in her house, with all kinds of her family's favorite baked goods, cakes and cookies, delicious homemade stuff. The next morning, she's busy getting ready for Shabbos. There's a lot to cook. There's a lot to clean. The kitchen needed a good, thorough cleaning, but she did it all very happily. And all of that joy almost flew out the window the minute her husband walked into the house. Okay, because here's what happened. It's late in the afternoon and he walks through the door holding a big bag. He puts it right down in the middle of the kitchen table, opens the bag and takes out a box, a bakery box filled with bakery cookies. And he makes a big announcement to the kids. I brought you yummy treats in honor of Shabbos Kodesh, L'Kavod Shabbos Kodesh. And the kids start clamoring. They're excited, clamoring around. They're so excited. And Bela is so taken aback. She could literally feel her heart drop into her shoes. Her whole insides were screaming. She felt like she was exploding with hurt, with frustration, with resentment, and just ouch. And then something happened that was different than had ever happened before in such kind of situations. But before I share what happened next, I want to just take a moment to review what we talked about last week. Remember, last week we asked, what comes first, the inside or the outside? What comes first, our emotions, our behavior, or what happens to us? Do other people cause us to have certain emotions? And we discussed how that's part of the story. That's what happens on the outside of the curtain, but there's so much more on the inside our own minds and hearts. And other people can trigger our emotions, but the intensity of our emotions and the way we experience our perspective and how we translate the commentary we give, the things that happens to us, it comes from our own selves. In other words, the facts are facts, but the story that we write comes from within our own hearts and within our own minds. There's something going on inside of ourselves that plays a huge role in how we write the stories of our experiences and how we feel about them. And that's something going on inside of ourselves is our rules, it's our values. The most intense values, the most intense emotions that we have, our greatest happiness, our greatest joy, and also our greatest shame and resentment, our misery will always be triggered by whatever we view as our source of power and identity. And by the way, I was discussing this idea with my daughter, Chaya. Shout out to Chaya Ginsberg. And she shared with me a fantastic visual that makes this concept so clear. I was like so excited when she told me. I'm like, oh, I wish I would have had this before, but I said, okay, I'm going to share it tonight. She said, imagine you're walking down the street holding a cup of water. And then you bump into a person or a person bumps into you. And of course, what happens? The water spills and it splashes all over you and you get wet. So what caused you to get wet? Is it the person who bumped into you? Is it the fact that you bumped into her? What caused you to get wet? It's not the person. It's you got wet because of the fact that you were holding a cup of water. If you wouldn't be holding that cup of water, the little bump would not make you wet. And I really appreciate this visual. Thank you, Chaya. Because being in relationships means that we will bump into people and people will bump into us. In other words, people will press play on whatever tapes we have in our minds. People will trigger the rules. They'll set our rules into motion. They'll set those rules that we have into motion. They'll violate them or they'll honor them. People will spill our cups. Whatever is in our cup, people will inevitably spill. And we'll get wet, we'll get impacted by whatever values we're holding on to, by whatever we're carrying around within us in the cups of our minds and hearts. So it's easy. So whenever you're feeling wet, whenever you're experiencing, especially when you're experiencing an intense emotion, it's easy. Our first reaction, instinctively, we're going to look at whoever bumped into us and blame them for making us feel that way, or we'll blame the circumstances for making us feel that way. And maybe we're right in blaming the circumstances. Maybe objectively the circumstances are actually really difficult. Okay, maybe the other person is wrong. Maybe their behavior was objectively wrong, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Okay, the first thing we want to learn is how to regain our own sense of calm and dignity, how to dry up when we got wet. And because and the source of that, the reason, first of all, why we're doing that is because even if the other person is wrong, and even if the situation is beyond what is reasonably expected for a human being to tolerate, even if we're going to tell the other person that we are hurt by their behavior, if we want to thrive in our relationships, if we want to have healthy, meaningful, happy, joyous relationships where we feel connected and satisfied, alive and energized and joyous, our first order of business is being able to have a healthy relationship with ourselves. It's being able to regain our own sense of our own center of inner calm and security and strength and dignity and worthiness. And how can we do that? We can do that by turning the spotlight in our minds inward and looking into whatever is in our cup. Why? Because if what's in our cup is something hurtful, we can empty it. We can get rid of it. And then we won't get wet anymore. We won't get wet, at least by that one. We might be holding a bunch of different, I think each of us are holding a few different layers of cups, but I get what I mean, right? That's the handle. If we look at what we believe, and especially if we look about who we depend on and who has the control, like power, identity, power and dependency, and power and identity and value and worthiness, those rules are going to give us the most intense emotions. So we want to, whenever we're feeling wet with overwhelming, intense emotions, the first thing we want to do is look into that cup and see what it is. That's the handle that we're going to be able to grab onto and adjust. So, and that's true, especially for what we want to, especially what we believe about our own selves, because when another person or a situation presses play on the rules of our security and of our identity, that's what triggers our most intense emotions. So having learned all of this last week, right? And feeling this, let's go back to Bela. She's standing in her kitchen, it's Friday afternoon. She said she listened to the recording again on Friday morning, so it was very fresh in her mind. And suddenly she feels this very strong wave of insecurity. And how could you do this to me? Resentment and a real sense of just being swept off her feet, like swept away out of herself. And so she did the action steps that we talked about last week. First of all, she took a few breaths to just pause and calm herself down and remind herself that she is okay. And then she asked herself, what thoughts are coming up for me? What do I believe about myself? First, what thoughts are coming up for me? And of course, her first thought was like, hello, I just spent an entire summer day baking and cooking and doing all of this. And my efforts were totally ignored and even made fun of in a certain way. It was like ridiculed. What do you mean? That's why I'm upset. But then she asked herself another important question. And she asked herself, what do I value about myself? What do I value about myself in context of this situation right here, right now? How is my value of myself being threatened here? And after asking herself this question, what do I value myself and how is my value and identity being threatened in this situation? She realized what she valued about herself. And she said, I literally started laughing out loud. It was so funny. It was like watching a comedy show. Because, and I want to, before I tell you what that value was, I want to tell you why she found it funny. It's because Bela was always aware. She had spent a lot of time working on developing a sense of self, thinking about Hashem's value, thinking about her Neshoma's value, thinking about, that she is good because she's good. And she always was aware that she valued having a fully stocked freezer. Many women do. Okay, having a fully stocked freezer was always important to her. But she always thought of it as a nice extra, as a nice like cherry on the top of the cake. And now she realized that this belief was pulling all the bells and whistles of her identity. And the reason she laughed was because she's a person who has so much real identity, such a real sense of worthiness. And so to find the belief that she found was, I am good because I bake a lot of good cake. I am good because I feed my family healthy food. To find that belief was very surprising for her. And another detail that came up for her was, because we were talking not just about identity, we were also talking about power. So she realized about the power part, like who's holding the power. She realized that she had imagined that she has the magical power to change her husband into a person who values healthy food choices and who would want home baked goods rather than bakery, rather than anything, even the most delicious cookie from a commercial bakery. Now, as I'm telling you all of this, it's like you're watching or hearing the story happen in slow motion, but really it happened in less than a fraction of a minute, right? Because that's how our minds work that way. It all happens in like, whoop, in the speed of the wink of an eye, of the blink of an eye. And also all of this conversation and awareness happened inside of her, inside her own mind and heart. Meanwhile, back on the outside of the curtains, on the outside of the story, so her husband puts down this box on the table, and he sees her face change from shock and distress to literally laughing out loud. And he looks at her like, what just happened? What on earth? What just happened? So she said very calmly and with a smile, I spent all day yesterday schwitzing to fill up an entire freezer filled with a variety of everyone's favorite cookies and cake. Choices, we have options, we have different kinds, right? And I thought that that's what makes me into a good mother and a good wife. But I realized that it's not. And that's why I'm laughing. Her husband right away said, "Oh, I am so sorry. I can get this box out of here. Don't worry about it. I'll give it away. I wasn't thinking. We don't need this cake." But she said, "No. It's okay. It's okay. It's here already." And I'm actually really happy that I learned something so helpful. So maybe just for that, it was worth it, because it's so wonderful to know that I am so much more. I am so much more precious than my entire freezer filled with cake. And it's true. When we experience this kind of intense, overwhelming loss of self, or feeling so rejected and dismissed and unwanted, and we can look inside our own hearts and minds and find the roots of that overwhelming feeling, it's so liberating, it's so freeing. It's like giving birth to a whole new level of strength and worthiness and dignity. Now, when Bela told me the story, my first question to her was like, okay, tell me what this story would have looked like before you had all the awareness and before you had the strength. And so she said, I always struggled. I would snap. My mind would go to negative places. But I went a few years ago from snapping at everyone to learning how really mastering and working very hard on calming myself down. I would talk to myself very well. But even when I learned how to calm myself down, it was like trying to, she didn't say these words, but the way I understood it is trying to push away an ocean with a teaspoon. Trying to push away an ocean with it. I was always like, okay, calm down, nothing happened, you're okay. She was very good at talking to herself into talking soothingly to herself. You have to hear her talking. She has a very soothing voice. She talks herself into calming down, but inside, her little girl was screaming. It was so hard. It was literally like pushing away an ocean with a spoon. And now she said she finally learned how to hear, first of all, to hear that little girl screaming, to realize that it's not her husband, and it's not the cake, and it's not the freezer, and it's not all the mountains of Schwitz that she invested for a full day. It's not. It's that little girl inside of her who believes that she is a good person because she baked a freezer full of cake. She is a good person, a good mother, and a good wife because she has a fully stocked freezer with options, with choices, with goodies that are freshly made from scratch. So before this moment, the curtains had always been closed. She didn't realize that this little girl inside of her was even there. She didn't realize that she had this belief, that she had this value. She just thought she's upset because of her husband, because such things happened before, or because of the other people in her life, in other situations. And maybe those people were even wrong. Maybe they were not, maybe her husband was being insensitive and uncaring. But right now, that's not what we're talking about. Right? She never believed. We're talking about the fact that she never believed that she had this belief about herself. She never realized, she never saw that rule. And once she realized that this is what she believed, she could pick up that little girl and give her a hug and a big smile and say, it's okay. It's okay, sweetie. You're good because you're good. You're good because you're good. That full freezer is just a nice thing that you did. It's not who you are. You're good because you are good. And when we can say this to ourselves and we can believe it, and when we can believe it for real, then our effort to calm down is no longer like trying to push away an ocean with a teaspoon, because there's no more ocean. There's no more ocean. It just is the teaspoon. And we could deal with teaspoons of disappointment and hurt and rejection. We could deal with that. We just cannot deal with oceans. When there's a teaspoon, okay, we deal with it. You know, we can express ourselves. We can communicate from that place of calm, security, and dignity. Like from a place of calm, Bela could just say, by the way, thank you. It means so much to me that that you care to give the kids an excitement for Shabbos, and you want to make the kids excited about Shabbos. I so much appreciate that. I really, really, I'm so grateful. Just, I have this thing. I just don't want the excitement. I have this thing with healthy food. I don't want the excitement to be about bakery cookies. So what else can you do to give the kids an excitement about Shabbos? So when we are, that's beautiful relationship talking, right? That's beautiful communication. But that kind of communication is impossible when we are in the mode of fight or flight, when we're fighting to protect our very survival, our very identity. That doesn't come up for us, right? When we're so hurt, we cannot think clearly. We cannot even see the good in the other person. It's all black. It's all an ocean of resentment, frustration, disappointment, and real hurt. So somebody asked a question, what do I do if I am, remember last week we told the story about Dina and how she burst out screaming at somebody else. Somebody asked a question, she said, that's what happens in my house all the time with my kids. I'm finding myself bursting out with resentment, with anger, with frustration, with so much more intensity than the situation calls for. And I want to say that just asking this question tells me you're so wonderful, you're so brave. You really, really are brave, because what you could have said is, what should I do? I live with such annoying people. I live with such monsters. I live with such, so much chaos, so much insanity. But what you're saying is, and I hope that's not the case. What you're saying is, I recognize that when my kid comes over to me and asks for X, Y, or Z, or when my kid makes this and this mistake and I explode, maybe they're wrong, but there's something inside of me. There's a fuse that just went off, and I want to deactivate that fuse. I want to let go of that cup of water. I want to get to the root of why this keeps happening to me. And the way to do that is in a moment of frustration, or maybe I think in the beginning, when you're just starting this, it's really hard to do it in the moment. But if you can look back at something that happened recently and really be honest with yourself and say, what did I believe about myself in that moment? What did I believe in that situation? I am 100% sure that you'll start realizing that, you'll start realizing maybe I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. If my kids are asking me for things, then it means I'm not a good enough mom. Try to think try to think based on the situations that tick you off. Try to think, what do I believe about myself right there in that situation? Who's holding the power to control? Who's giving me my identity? What is giving me my identity? And with time, you'll start to see the rules that really, really set off your fuse. And from that place, we can consciously make a decision. Hey, I want to let go of that because that's not my real me. That's really not what's going to give me value. That's not what's going to give me my identity. And when we can calm ourselves down, when we can deactivate that fuse that goes off, then and really have that strong sense of self on a very deep level, when we can let go of those values that are hurting us and causing us to hurt the people in our lives, when we can hold on to our true identity and our true value, it's a whole different story. It changes the way we write the stories of our lives, not just for ourselves, but for every person that we're in a relationship with. And okay, so that was one question, and we have a bunch more, and I'm not going through all of them, but I picked a few today that Be'ezer Hashem that are directly relevant and build on this. Okay, and Be'ezer Hashem we'll get to more of them over the next 2 weeks. So I just want to remind everyone, if you're listening to this and you want to submit a question, the email address for questions is shterna@energizedliving.org. If you want to get onto our mailing list to hear about future workshops and to get on our mailing list, to get the recordings, to get the notes, that email address is info@energizedliving.org, or message to 718-576-0338. If you don't have any text or email or WhatsApp, then call into our hotline every couple of weeks. The number to our hotline, we update the hotline with what's happening every season. Sometimes it's every few weeks, sometimes it's every couple of months. The hotline number is 718-307-1100, and that's on option 2. Okay, so the first question I want to address is very basic and fundamental, and I feel like if we could get this clear, it's a huge piece in the puzzle, and maybe some of you already have this question as you're listening. But once you have clarity about this, your work will be so much easier. And this is the question, okay? I see my neshama as a gift from Hashem, a part of Hashem, a privilege that comes with an obligation to make it happy and let it express itself. But how does that make me into a good person? If I get $1 million gift, I am fortunate. If I get the neshama, I am lucky. How does that make me good? If I am the daughter of that king, how does that make me a good person? That's the question. Okay, and I want to make this question even stronger because from past workshops that we did, I know that this question is very fundamental. Okay, what we're talking about here is not just that our neshama makes us into a good person or a better person. What we're talking about is that our neshama is actually the one and only thing that makes us into an absolutely good person. Everything else is either what we have or what we do. The only one thing that is the truth of who we are is our neshama, an actual part of Hashem that's within us. Everything else is invented value. It's invented value. Only our neshama is our true and absolute value. And I want to let's back up to explain what I'm going to first of all explain why. But before that, I want to explain the difference and what that looks like. Okay, in the story that we just told about Bela, right, being a wonderful baker, being a wonderful wife, being a wonderful hardworking woman, okay, being committed to her family and having a fully stocked freezer, all of those things are nice qualities. They're qualities that we could aspire to. They're things we want to do. But the minute it becomes who I am, it becomes destructive. The minute this is my identity, it's very nice to value having a good, it's nice. You want to make a freezer full of food? Beautiful. Beautiful. It's such a nice thing to do. So meaningful, special. But the minute it becomes who you are, the minute it defines how good you are, the minute that's what makes you a good person, that's when it has the power to make you a bad person. If it could make you, it could break you. If it could define you, it could destroy you. So we want to be very careful. And I want to also be very honest, okay? Without being able to recognize that her value is not her freezer, Bela would have been very, very hurt. And as much as she would have tried to calm down, as much as she would have tried very, very hard, it would probably be almost impossible. None of us listening to her story would blame her for lashing out at her husband, or for shutting down, or for getting into a bad mood, or for even just thinking that he is insensitive and uncaring. None of us would blame her. And yet, if she would do any of those things, if she would go down those roads, we know what they look like. Those roads are tragic. And I want to just be very clear. I am not talking about I'm not talking about abusive relationships. Okay, that's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about people, we're not talking about chas v'shalom, people who take pleasure in hurting other people, chas v'shalom, or people who have no regard for other people's boundaries, for other people's requests, for other people's self, for other people. What happened in Bela's kitchen could happen in my kitchen, it could happen in your kitchen, it could happen in anyone's kitchen. And certainly the core of what happened could happen and does happen in all of our relationships all the time. Something goes wrong, a misunderstanding, a lack of sensitivity, a lack of caring, a thoughtless remark. We get upset, right? Because of course we get upset. We get upset at the other person. And from there, it just spirals downward. So, it's like it becomes a game of negative energy, then negative, just a negative spiral that doesn't get better. It never gets better when you're feeling resentful because of a comment that someone made, or something that someone did or didn't do. The resentment doesn't really go away. It just comes right back the next time the cup of water gets bumped into. The next time you're walking around, you bump into that cup of water, you're going to get wet all over again. But as you get older, that cup of water gets moldy, it gets wormy, it gets worse. And we all know what that looks like, right? As we get older, this also becomes, this in itself, the fact that we get so upset becomes a huge badge of shame, because we think, I'm a big girl. I'm a big girl. Why am I getting so upset? So she ignored me. So she said something not nice. Why do I feel like such a baby? Why am I acting so immature? Why do I feel so lost, so zerbrochen, so zerschmettert? How do you say zerschmettert? Shattered. Growing up is not just something that happens to us. Growing up is a choice that we make when we can be honest with ourselves. And when we, instead of looking outwards, we really look inwards to our own cup of water, to our beliefs and values. And with that awareness, once we have that awareness, we can consciously let go of the values and the beliefs about ourselves that are not true. And that's the one thing that saved Bela in the story. The one thing that restored peace and love and tranquility and joy and connection and all the positive energy in this story, in her home, for herself, for her husband, for her family. It's such a beautiful story. Like, with one moment of choice, she changed everything. Okay. The one thing that changed it is not just Bela believing that she's a good person. Okay. Because she always believed she's a good person. It wasn't enough. And we talked about last week, thinking about Maida'ani and absorbing the magnitude of our awesomeness, of our goodness, of our untouchable dignity and worthiness. And so that's one thing, to download the positive energy, the positive identity. That's one thing. But that's not what saved her that day. You know what saved her? It's that perfect clarity that Bela had. She had that clarity that not just that I'm a good girl, But what makes me a good girl is my neshama. What makes me into a good person is the fact that I am a chelik elakami mal mamash. Everything else is external. Everything else is only what I do or what I have. Only my neshama is who I is who I am. And having that clarity is what made her laugh out loud when she realized, hey, that's so funny. That's so funny. Here I am believing that my freezer is what makes me into a good person. What a joke. What an absolute joke. And I never realized I was giving so much power, so much space, and so much energy to my freezer. And I would love for every person who's listening to have this clarity because it is such a wonderful blessing. So here's the question we're going to answer. Let's go back to that question, okay? I understand that my neshama is good, but how does that make me into a good person? Right? It's something about me. It is not me. And the stretched version of this question that I'm asking based on other questions that people ask in different forms is this. You know, my life is bad. Okay? My life is messed up. Fill in the blanks with whatever you want to call bad. Okay. I am trying, whatever it is, whether it's I'm trying to raise my kids, my children on my own with no support, and it's so hard. I am trying to lose weight and I cannot. My teenagers are giving me so much heartache. My husband, my mother, my brother, my sister, my aunt, my whatever it is. I don't have any money. I don't have any friends who I can talk to and discuss this with. I'm not feeling well all the time. You know, even if I'm not feeling well for good reasons, you know, somebody asked that question. I'm so nauseous every single morning. How am I supposed to feel good about myself, right? So my life is bad. My situation is messed up. How am I supposed to feel good? Because the problems that I'm talking about and the difficulties and the challenges and the situations that I face are practical. They're in this world. How am I supposed to feel good for a reason that is so lofty and so abstract? Okay, so this was a mix of a few questions. And here let's talk about this for a minute, okay? For a few. Whenever we look at something, there's always many different parts, okay? But then there's one thing that makes it what it is. And we define all things according to whatever it is that gives it the most value. So for example, if I have a painting in a beautiful frame, if I have a painting in a stunning, exquisite frame, okay, what's more important, the painting or the frame? And the answer is, right? Or if I'm looking at it, I'm saying, what is this thing? Is it a frame or is it a painting, right? What is it? Is it a frame that happens to be in this specific? Is it a painting that happens to be in this specific frame? Or is it a frame that happens to have this picture, this painting, this portrait inside of it? Which one is it? Which one is it? How will we refer to this thing? What will we call it? What will be its definition? Now, the answer is a typical Jewish answer. It depends, right? It depends, right? It depends on what kind of value each part has, how much value each part has. If you have a beautiful frame that's made out of real gold and it is studded with precious stones, a magnificent work of art in and of itself, you have this frame that costs $5,000, $10,000, and then you have a 3-year-old or your neighbor's 3-year-old who scribbles a painting, right, in just a few minutes, and just for fun, you put it into this frame because you have it lying around and you really want it on your wall and you like it, right? So what is it? It's a beautiful frame hanging on your wall. It's a beautiful frame hanging on your wall. It's a work of art, an expensive piece of decor that illuminates your home. It's a beautiful frame. The frame has plenty of value, right? So it's a frame with a toddler's scribbling in it. But the main thing is the frame. But then let's say that same toddler becomes a world-class artist, and his paintings sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, then when we look at the same scribbles, everything changes, right? The same thing that 20, 30 years ago was a very precious frame, all of a sudden we're looking at the picture differently. The picture is so precious, the picture is so valuable. So we look at the same object and suddenly the painting has more value than the frame. And that's why when we look at it, we don't call it a gold frame. It's not a gold frame that happens to have a toddler's scribbles. It's an expensive work of art that's framed in a suitably expensive, precious frame. The definition changes because the definition goes always according to the value. So with that introduction, let me ask you again, okay? What defines you? What defines you? What is the most valuable, precious thing about you? When you look at yourself in the mirror, is it your personality? Is it your looks? Is it your body? Is it your yichus? Your who your parents were? Is it how much money you have in the bank? Is it your job? Is it your husband? Is it your kids? What is it? What is it that makes you special? What's the one thing that defines you? Is it the roles that you play? Is it the fact that you're someone's sister, daughter, aunt, cousin, mother, neighbor? Is that whatever the most important thing about us? That's how we'll define ourselves. And ultimately, anything that we're going to say about us has only relative value. The only thing that has absolute value is our neshama. Let's brain for a minute about what I mean by this, okay? In the world of business, or even not in the world of business, just if I have $5, okay, is that a lot? Is that a lot of money? Is that good? Well, it depends, right? It's relative. It compared to 5 pennies, $5 is a lot. But compared to 500, $5 is nothing, right? Now I look at the 500, that's a lot, right? But compared to 5,000, it's nothing. Compared to 5 million, it's even more nothing. Every single thing in this world, every single thing in this world has only relative value. Relative means it's only relative to other things. The value is only relative to other things or relative to how long we have it. Okay? Every single thing that exists in this world has an expiration date. It has an expiration date. It has an end. It has a beginning. Any talent that we have, even any accomplishment is only special relatively to, yay, I wrote a book. Okay, great. Well, somebody else wrote 30 books. You know what I mean? Whoa, it's an amazing book. You know how many copies it sold? So many copies. You really? Well, some other books sold. It's nothing. It's only relative. And people who get onto social media and get excited about looks. I once heard somebody say, I used to get excited when I had 5,000 likes on a certain, or 5,000 views on a video. Now 5,000 is nothing. And I'm not even happy or satisfied when I have, 5 million doesn't make me feel, because there's always relative to something bigger than that. So any value that we attribute to ourselves on anything about us is always going to be relative. It's always going to be relative. It's always going to be conditional, right? Because it's not really, so that means it's not true. It's not true. It's not absolute value. It's only relative value. And it's not lasting. It has an expiration date. The only thing about ourselves, there's only one thing about ourselves that has absolutely unconditional value. And it's not just more. You see, when you have a gallon of water and then you compare it to 10 or even 10,000 gallons of water, those numbers are comparable. But when you have 1 gallon of water, can you compare it to an ocean? Can you compare it to all the water of the universe? So when we compare our neshama to other things about us, let's remember our neshama has infinite value, right? Because it's a part of Hashem. There's no number on Hashem. There's no beginning, there's no end, there's no start, there's no finish. There's no more or less. Hashem is infinite. So our neshama is infinite. And that's why only our neshama has, has unconditional value. Why am I worthy? Why am I dignified? Why do I matter? It's if I'm attributing that to any other reason, those reasons are changeable. Those reasons are relative to, and they're relative to comparison to others. They're subject to definition by other people and even by myself. They're subject to assessment, right? Because it's a value that's only dependent on perspective. It's not absolute value. Okay, and those things might have an expiration date. They might be taken away from me. I might lose them. They might not. I might not any longer be able to accomplish those things. True value means value that never ever changes. A body changes in value. A body has an expiration date. Every single thing that we have, that every single talent is only relative value. Every single thing. The only thing that has absolute value, the only thing that has value that is always the same, that is unconditional, untouchable, unchangeable, is our neshama. And it never ever could be impacted. It can never be diminished. It could be concealed from our consciousness, but it can never stop to be there. We could forget about it and get lost, but we can never stop being it. We can never actually be lost to it because it's our deepest self. It's who we are. So that's why I'm saying that no matter what else is true about any of us, our neshama is always pure and it's always precious. And not only that, but our neshama is our true self. That is our only true self. That's our only pure true self. And yet, the fact is that our neshama is invisible. We cannot see it. So in the absence of its visibility, what happens when we can't see it? We forget. We forget about it. We forget that this is what exists. We forget that this is what defines us. It becomes abstract to us. We never think about it. It becomes abstract because in a certain sense, it is abstract. It's not something we could see. And so what do? We invent an identity. And we live in a culture where everybody is doing this. Even in the very, very frum communities, Borough Park, Williamsburg, Monroe, we're all doing this. We invent an identity and we invent a self for ourselves. We decide that our clothing and our looks and our external circumstances and conditions will be ourself. Our money, our house, or who our husband is, who our children are, what the names are, what the street knows about us, what they don't know about us, what we invent the self and we go by it. And in every moment, in every interaction, we are engaging in our lives from one of two positions. We're either plugged into our true self, we're either aware of our true self and experiencing that flow of true energy, true vitality, true dignity and worthiness, or we are not. But whenever we're not, what happens is we're plugged into our invented self. We always have an invented self handy that we move into whenever we're not aware of our true self. We automatically shift into our invented self. So, okay, I'm going to the notes for a second because I want to make sure that I'm covering everything. The only thing about us that has unconditional value is our neshama. And that's why the only way we could experience true, absolute, unconditional worthiness and connection is when we value our neshama more than anything else about ourselves. Because when we're in the mode of our invented selves, we cannot value ourselves unconditionally. We value ourselves only when we're doing good things, things that are good in our eyes, things that are good in other people's eyes. Okay. Many people value themselves only as their value is relatively more than other people. And I remember a very common question that people ask is like, well, if I'm valued because of my neshama and everybody has a neshama, what's going to make me better than other people? You know, what's going to make me better? Right? Because we're so into this mode of I need to be better. My value is when I am better. So how am I going to be better? If it's not my shopping that makes me better, if it's not my looks and my house and my clothing and my kids even that makes me better, it's not what I have and what I do and even my chesed, and my mitzvahs that I do that makes me better. What makes me better? And the truth is, nothing makes us better than anyone else. We are not better, qualitatively better than anyone else. We can be better in the sense that we can show up with more of our true self shining brightly, but we can't be better. How do you be better than Hashem? We're a part of Hashem. How do you be better than that? It doesn't get better, but we don't need to be better to be better. We don't need to be better to be better, because really being attached to our truth, to an unstoppable force of dignity and worthiness, is just about as better as it gets. It's as better as it gets. But all of us come into adulthood very firmly anchored within our invented self. That's where we stand. And that's where many of us on this call here tonight, that's where we are. That's where we stand. We identify ourselves based on circumstances and conditions, by what's happening to us, by what other people are doing to us. And if I think that good looks is what makes me into a good person, then when I look good, I feel good. When I look bad, I feel bad. It's my 20, 30 pounds of being overweight is a badge of shame and dishonor. If I think that money is what makes me good or bad, then I am, I'm bad. I'm embarrassed to walk in the street. So the challenges that we have are one thing, but the fact that we attach it to our identity, Bela's being in that kitchen, it was a challenging moment. It's not so pleasant. She wouldn't choose that. She would much rather her husband say, "Whoa, thank you so much for baking all that cake. Kinderlach, look what we have. We're so gebenched. Look what our mommy did for us. She schwitzed the whole day." Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be sweet? It's not so happifying for her husband to totally ignore the fact, and do something that they're married for, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years, maybe more. I didn't ask her age, but she has big kids, Kanai, like, what shouldn't he have known by now? You would think, right? But so that's one challenge. It's unpleasant, right? But if on top of that, we have to deal with our own inner critic, our own inner value, our own cup of wormy, dirty, moldy water that spills all over ourselves, that's a whole new level of suffering and misery. So what can we do about this? What can we do to help ourselves? I just want to review. I'm going to go back to the notes that we had and just review that. Just go through that list, okay? The action, okay? First of all, we have to keep growing awareness, because somebody shared here before we started the recording, somebody shared her own moment of growing awareness. That's so amazing. The minute you have awareness, you have the possibility to make an awesome choice. So keep growing awareness. That's number one. Number two is, whenever you're feeling disempowered, take a look at your core values. Do like Bela did in today's story, okay? Who's my power? Who's holding the control buttons? What's being controlled here? And most importantly, what do I believe about myself in context of this situation, in context of this reality, okay? Number three, we spoke about this last week, move from judgment to compassion. Just don't use anything that we're talking about to beat yourself up. Really, really, the minute you find yourself hating on yourself, being in a judgmental state, you are in your invented self. That's not your true self, because your neshama is nice to everyone, including yourself, okay? So when you find yourself beating yourself up, you should just know you are in your invented self. Move right back into your true self. And how do you do that? Okay, so the first way to do that is to start saying Maida Ani, like we said before, 15 seconds to expand your consciousness. But I think we need to we spoke about this also, seeing is believing. So visualize it, give it words, give it new creative words. I'm a light, I am dignified, I'm a princess, I'm majestic, I am worthy. Think of new words, and those words become the actual visual, and you're visualizing and you're thinking about it, become layers upon layers of a self that you can move into when you slip away. It becomes layers and layers of a strength, of a core belief, a core value that you can always go back to hold onto. And most importantly, doing this again and again gives you more and more clarity, so that when you bump into something that clashes with your truth, you're going to realize it more, right? When you go off sugar, okay, you detoxify, you're off sugar for a full 6 months, okay? All of a sudden you eat a cup of soda, you drink a cup of soda, and you feel a rush of a headache, okay? Now it could be 6 months before, when you were eating sugar nonstop, guzzling sugar, you didn't have a headache. You didn't feel that headache when you had a cup of Coke, right? You didn't feel that when you had a cup of soda or a piece of a commercial donut. You only had that headache. You were aware of the headache because you had no sugar in your system. So the more healthy beliefs we have in our system, the more time we spend and effort we invest on absorbing and thinking about and really connecting with our true identity, our true worthiness. That gives us a sensitivity, so that when a lie pops up in our mind, so that when we look at ourselves and see, hey, I believe that I am a good person because I have a fully stocked freezer, we can laugh at it, because it's so far from what we really believe. It's a joke. It's not even, of course, it's not true. It's a joke. But we only have that clarity when we develop that clarity. Okay. One other thing that we didn't mention last week is that to ask a very transformative question. And somebody in the group always says, what if I don't feel it? I know it in my head. I don't feel it in my heart. I don't feel the dignity. I'm thinking about it, but I don't feel the dignity. I don't feel the worthiness. So I always ask them this question. I say, what would you do if you felt absolute worthiness and dignity? If you really respected yourself, what would you do every single day? What would you do right now if you really respected yourself? Or what would you not do? And they say whatever it is. Some people say, I'll make my bed. I don't know, I'll clean the house. I will make healthy food. I'll stop, wasting my time. I'll stop, eating that tub of ice cream. I'll stop junking my body, whatever it is. I'll stop hanging out with that person who's really, really, takes advantage of me and makes me feel like, always pulls me down. And I'll stop gossiping. I'll stop going on this website that really just, I walk away from, always disempowered. I'll stop it. So whatever it is, stop doing it now. Think about what you would do and what you would stop doing if you really owned respect for yourself. And then act on it, whether or not you feel it, act on it. And the action will bring the feelings. And I want to conclude with number 5. It's not enough to download positive energy. It's not enough to do all the things in number 4 is beautiful. And that's what was good for last week. And many of you shared that you did it and it was a very beautiful experience. So if you didn't try it yet, I want to encourage you to give it a try. Nobody who did this did not have results. Everybody has results. There's something very special about taking time to think and absorb the magnitude of your true value and dignity. But that's not enough. It's like you're downloading, we think in terms of computers. We could download positive energy, but what happens if we have a virus in our system? What happens if there's a virus in the computer? It's not going to work. All the positive energy in the world will get sucked up and impacted negatively by the virus in our system. So we have to realize that we come into adulthood with a value system that does not reflect the truth of who we are. And as a result of our childhood experiences, or as a result of just the surrounding culture, we absorb values that contradict and deny the truth of Hashem's value. Because if Hashem is what makes me good, then a freezer full of cake cannot make me good, because how could I equate the two? One is a thing of measure, one is infinite. One has a very near expiration date and one has no expiration date. One is conditional. If it tastes good, if it is good, if people like it, and one is absolute value. No matter what anyone says or do, how can you even, it's an infinite difference. There's no comparison. You cannot, right? You cannot, every place in our heart where we value something and we identify that thing as this is what makes me a good, this thing is what makes me a good person, that is a virus. That is a virus, and it's going to impact us. It's going to be a fuse that will blow up in our relationships, and including our relationship with ourselves, and have all kinds of negative impacts. It will be there unless we see it and consciously decide that it's a virus. It's a virus. It's a joke. We want to laugh at it. We want to laugh at it. And why are we going to laugh at it? Because it's nothing. Once we see it, the whole strength of a lie is the fact that is a lie, that it's a lie, is invisible. Once an idea is exposed as a lie, it's nothing. It's just a lie. We don't have to believe it. We don't have to give power to it. We don't have to give, it has no substance. It's like all the air gets out of it. Once we can look at a belief that we have and say, this is what makes me good? No way. That's not what's going to make me a good person. I reject that idea. That's just a virus that I have maybe from my childhood, but I am consciously choosing to, I am consciously choosing to affirm, to commit, to appreciate and absorb that only Hashem's presence within me is what makes me good. And Hashem's value within me matters more than this failure, or than this success, than this rejection, or this glorious victory. You know, we're speaking a lot about negative experiences, but the same thing applies to, you know, positive experiences. It's also an opportunity to say, wait, why do I feel so good, right? What is that virus, right? It might not always be a virus. Why do I feel good? Because I'm so good because I worked hard and I succeeded. Great, that's beautiful. It's connecting. That's a value that flows from the essence of who we are, from the truth of our neshama. But so many times it's, oh, because somebody important gave me a compliment, right? So we want to, it's not enough to download positivity. We want to get rid of the virus. And how do we do that? By becoming aware, by asking ourselves the questions we spoke about before, like, what do I believe about myself? And being willing to say, this thing is not what makes me a good person. What makes me a good person is Hashem's presence within me. Okay, let's do some questions here. I love this question. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. This is a phenomenal question. Okay, thank you. Let's go. Let me explain this. This is such a great question. Thank you. Okay, so the question is, in the story that we just shared with Bela, okay, what if I don't do that whole process? What if I just remind myself I am good, I am precious, I am worthy? And what if that's enough to calm me down? And why is it important, or is it important to do that process of finding that value where I believe I am good if my freezer is filled? Okay, so that's a great question, because here's what I think. And I love your question, because we're always looking for shortcuts. And I think that so many of us, you know, it's like we say gamzul taiva, you know, two things happen when we can really connect with our dignity in a real way. Two things happen. First of all, sometimes you're so hurt that you say, oh, it's okay, but really underneath, you're really upset. And not only are you upset, but you hold it against the other person. Okay, even though you are hurt, even though you hurt me, even though you're a mean person, I am dignified and I'm going to be okay and I'm going to be Miss Hero. And even though you are so wrong, that's really what we're doing. You know, we're really not seeing the person as good. We're seeing the person as bad. You know, but just we're better. We're good. We're getting over ourselves, even though that person, we're seeing ourselves kind of as a martyr almost. Like, even though, you know, I just suffered, I took a beating, that person beat me up, but I'm going to survive. I'm going to stand up strong. The danger of skipping that step is that we get into this place of like, even though that person did something wrong, I'm still right. And that creates, even though I feel good about myself, you see, because there's two things that are important in this. The goal, as far as I'm concerned, the goal is not that we should feel good. That's not, I mean, it's step one. Step one is to reconnect with our worthiness, with our dignity, and come to a place of calm and security. But from that place, I do want to go back. I want to circle back to that unpleasant experience and say, hey, I really don't like when you do that. Could you please, do you mind, or say it nicely, but make a request, but don't just ignore it. You know what I mean? And I think when we skip that step of really taking ownership of our part in the mess of our belief, then it's not as deep. That sense of goodness that we have, the reason why we got upset is really, at the end of the day, it's not only because of what that person did. It's also because of something inside of ourselves. So we miss out on a layer of goodness that's waiting to be discovered. Now, I'm not saying that you have to allow yourself to feel so hurt and identify it and all that every single time you get hurt. I'm just saying it's important when you feel very intensely, broken, or very intensely rejected, or it's whenever there's very intense emotions, it's important to look at, what do I believe about myself? Because two things will happen. Number one, you have more chance at, like, the relationship itself, you will not come to looking at the other person as negatively. Like, when people first start this work, they look at it like, okay, now the goal is, the end of the story is, I felt good even though something bad happened. But that's not the goal. The goal is, I invited joy and peace and love and connection into my relationship, and the other person also felt good. And it wasn't just the goodness that, like, I survived, it was that I thrived. I love your question. Thank you so much for asking this. So someone's asking a question that goes like this. Okay, let's say something happens that gets me upset, and the person is asking it in terms of a husband, but really the same question could be asked in any relationship, right? Someone did something that made me upset. Is the work to tell myself, like, to work through it myself and get out of a place of upset and frustration and rejection or worry, whatever it is. And so then nothing happens. So then I don't have to tell him anything. Or is it still okay? Is it still considered okay that I still do the work if I go back and tell the person, by the way, I was really worried when you came home late, or I didn't like when you said that. Did I get your question? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm so glad you asked this question, because if without this question, people could chas v'shalom use the ideas that we talked about to perpetuate abuse and dysfunction. And that would be so tragic, because really we could make ourselves so okay with so many things that are not okay. And that's not the point of any of this, okay? There's always two parts. Whenever something upsetting happens in a relationship, there's two things. One is the fact that happened, okay? And then there's the commentary about that fact, the story that we write about that fact. So let's say in the example that you used, your husband came home late, okay? And that triggered anxiety, okay? And in that place of anxiety, you realize, hey, am I not important enough to be told? I am not an important person in my husband's eyes, because he didn't tell me that he's going to be late. And if I'm not important in his eyes, I'm a failure of a wife. And if I'm a failure of a wife, then my whole life is valueless, because all my life I was just waiting to be married, and now I'm married and I'm a failure. So I'm a failure, bottom line, right? So all that comes back down to I'm nothing. I'm nothing. So once you do that work, you realize that all that is just commentary. It's the story you made up. It's not true. And it has you can laugh at it. It's a lie. You're not bad. You're good. And you did nothing wrong here, right? You can talk yourself through that, and you really debunk that whole string of lies, right? What makes you a good person is the fact that you have a neshama. What makes you a good wife is the fact that you're here, the fact that you're trying your best, the fact that you could change all those rules. You could let go of all the toxicity, right? But that's only, your commentary. That is not the actual facts of the story. It's so important to always circle back to the fact of what happened. The fact, right? I let go of the negative story, write a happier story, but go back to the fact and address the fact. Please don't come home late without telling me before. I really don't like that. That's beautiful. And spoken from a place of dignity and security and love and connection, without any of the anger, that without attacking from the place of, I'm fighting for my life over here, I'm fighting for my identity. You're much more likely to be heard, but you deserve to be heard. You deserve to be understood, and definitely reach for that. Okay, thank you again. That was a really important question. I'm so happy we did that. Okay, I'm really grateful that you asked this question. I'm going to repeat it, okay? We came here in this world to work on ourselves. We came here to make ourselves something better than when we were born. We came here to do mitzvahs, not just to be a neshama, but to act on our neshama. So if I just validate myself and absorb the truth of my worthiness, then I'm not going to be motivated to change. I'm not going to be motivated to work hard, to grow, and to learn. And so I want to say this, that all those beliefs, we have a very strong belief, and I see this very, very much. Women are we're so hard on ourselves. And it's so hard to let go of this belief that we will get better only if we stand there, with our arms on our hip, one arm on our hip and the other one wagging our finger at ourselves, ticking our clock. Why, holding. We have a whole committee of Rebbitzins in our heads that tells us, you're not good enough. Let's go. Come on. Let's go. Shut up, show up, do more, be better. And if we want to be honest with ourselves, that part of ourselves, maybe sometimes it motivates you. Yeah, when you beat up a kid, and that kid realizes that that the only way to stop being beaten up is to go and bring you that cup of water, so they'll go bring you the cup of water. But what was it worth beating them up? Was it worth beating them up? Did they got you the cup of water, but they lost their preciousness. They lost their true motivation. They lost their true eagerness to shine. They lost their true desire to please you, to make you happy, not because you're beating them up, but because they love you, because they want to make you happy. So we as a community, we got very used to beating ourselves up into submission, into behavior, into surrender. There used to be, I think someone told me, shame therapy. Okay, if someone did something wrong, shame therapy. There was an actual therapist who practiced this as a belief. If I shame you enough, you will change. And it's not funny. It's tragic. It's terribly tragic, because to undo that person is working so hard for the rest of his life. He's working hard to undo that shame that was supposed to. So nobody truly changes from being criticized, beaten, and put down. We don't change from that. We change when we are loved, when we're embraced, when we're valued. That's what changes us on a deeper level. And just because something works doesn't mean that it's healthy, right? Just because I beat up the kid and now he listens, that's short-term gain, long-term damage. Because if you look around at our community and look around at ourselves, the price that we are paying for being judgmental is tragic. The price that each of us, look at your own life. The price that you're paying for being hard on yourself is such a lack of joy. You can't be happy with your kids. You can't be happy with your husband, because just like you're beating up yourself, you're beating up them. You can't be happy with any person. You just got, I remember sitting on the Shetel Macha's chair the first time I got a beautiful Shetel. I remember, and I had wanted it for a long time. I remember on the Shetel Macha's chair, getting that Shetel thinking, oh, what's the next thing I'm gonna want? Like what's next on my list? It's never enough. Once our identity is about things and accomplishments, it's never enough. And we can never sit back, relax, and delight and really be happy and really celebrate the people we love. And most importantly, because this is in terms of we can't truly love. We can't love ourselves, and we can't love our children. We can't love our parents. We can't love anybody in our lives if we cannot value our neshama more than anything else about us. We can't, because that is the only true, unconditional love. It's a great question. I want to repeat it for the recording. And if anyone else has questions, I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to address it tonight. Just email to Shterna at energizedliving.org. B'ezras Hashem, I will address it. And if you sent in a question that wasn't addressed tonight, it's because I'm saving it for next week or the week after, according to the topics that we're going to be addressing. So someone's asking a beautiful question, and it's so courageous. It's so beautiful that you're asking this. It just reflects such honesty and courage, really. Because, and what the question is that, as I've been doing this work, she's been doing this work for a while, and she's really like out of that bubble of the rat race and that treadmill of like go, get, do, and be, and like more, and like all that the frustration and the anxiety and the stress and the misery and the resentment, all that stuff, she's out of it, Baruch Hashem. She's still working on it, because we all still work in it. But it's also, once you're in the struggle, once you're in the game, you're already in a better place, because you're not marinating in the misery and the resentment. You're letting go. You're working actively to let go of it. It's a whole different place. You're not just sitting on the sidelines. You're off the roller coaster. The curtains are open. You're in the game. The show is happening, and you're hot into it. It's a very special feeling. It's a very elevated feeling. And then from that place, when I look at other people who are not in the game, and they're marinating in the same old misery and resentments and the frustration, and they didn't get the size 7, and this person said this, and they're so petty. And how do we help ourselves not feel better than, and the person who's asking this question is so aware that she's like, well, this voice sounds like the voice of ego, but how do I let go of it? So here's what I think what could help let go of it is this, that every blessing that we have, everything that we have in our life is a blessing from Hashem. Every single thing. If I have money, it's a blessing from Hashem. If I have good health, it's a blessing. If I have anything good, anything or anyone in my life, it's all a blessing from Hashem. Even my ruchnius is a blessing from Hashem. Even my awareness is a blessing from Hashem. I was once speaking with a woman, and her husband has no awareness, and she has tons of awareness, and she's always doing the work. And she's like, I'm so tired. I'm always the one doing the work. I'm always the one initiating the goodness. I'm always the one who stops that cycle of negativity, because I have the awareness and he does not. He is really, when he gets into the victim, stays a victim, and he stays a victim until I save him. I'm so tired of saving him. And what we spoke about was, I asked her, look, would you rather it be the other way around? The awareness that we have is a gift. Other people might not have the awareness. I know for myself, I gained awareness, when I was 30 years old. In my 30s, I gained awareness. I look at people in their 20s and I'm like, wow, but it's a blessing. Why did I gain awareness? I didn't do anything. Hashem gave it to me. When you have good looks, when you have good money, when you have good anything, and even when you have good awareness, it's a blessing from Hashem. It doesn't make you better. It makes you blessed. And it doesn't make you sit back and judge other people. Like, if you think about it as a blessing, it comes with an obligation, to share it with other people who are interested, not to shove it down the throat of that person who you wish would have it, but it's too close, in that relationship, it's not appropriate to share it. But you get what I'm saying? It's like you want to just have compassion towards that person who doesn't yet have the awareness. Give them love because they really desperately need the love so much more than you do, because you have a fountain of love inside of your heart. That person doesn't. So give it to them. Once that's the perspective I think that can really, really, really take away that barrier between you and other people. It's like, I'm blessed. Just like there's no barrier between a rich person and a poor person unless they make themselves a barrier. You know what I mean? I'm blessed and I have so much love. I'm going to just be a force of love and light and hope to everyone around me. That's our responsibility. That's our way of saying, thank you, Hashem, for giving me awareness. Thank you, Hashem, for letting me feel my dignity, for letting me feel your presence within me. I love your question. Thank you so much for asking it. This Sunday is going to be Tisha B'Av. And how can we make ourselves ready to walk out of Galus and into Geula? And I want to say that exactly what we're doing now is that, because just like Hashem is in Galus in the world, our Neshoma is in Galus. It's hidden, stuffed away into the sub corners, the deep corners of our consciousness. And by us thinking about it and becoming aware of it and tapping into it and using it and leaning into that energy, we are redeeming it. We're literally turning the light on for our own personal Geula. And that is definitely bringing Geula, contributing to bringing Geula to the world. So let's share these ideas with other people. Let's practice them. Do the homework. Do the homework. I want to tell you, sometimes you might be looking at your life and looking at some of your relationships and saying, you know what, this is such a mess. This works. My life is such a mess, right? Things are really bad. And what Shterna is talking about sounds so nice, like, flowery, beautiful. It's not going to change my real problems. My friends, I guarantee you, if you try it, you will see results. Ta'amu u'ru'u ki tov Hashem. Taste and you will see that Hashem is good. Try it. Really try it. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Really be transformed to days of celebration.